one of the questions we have to think about and think seriously about is, how can I keep my life from getting smaller as my losses become greater?
Hi again, everybody. This is Heartbeat, featuring insights from Landon Saunders that focus on how to live a life that loves to happen. On today's episode, we've gone into the archive and pulled a talk that Landon gave to a group of professionals in the early 1990s. The question that he zeroes in on is, what does it mean to be a human being? So now, let's get back to Landon Saunders.
One of my favorite teaching stories is about a woman who came to a rabbi and she said, "My life is just awful. I am miserable. I am so distressed because I live out there with my husband, who's not the easiest person to get along with, and 4 children who run around through the house screaming all the time. And a few months ago, his parents moved in with us, and then a few weeks later, my parents moved in. Life is awful." And she was terribly stressed out. And the rabbi said, now, here's what I want you to do. I want you to go back home and go out to the barn and get the cow and bring the cow into the house, and then come back and see me next week. She protested but went. She brought the cow. She came back the next week more exasperated than ever. Life is so awful. She was so miserable with her husband and the children and her parents and his parents. And then this last week, that old cow stomping around, messing through the house. Life is just awful. And he said, "I understand. I want you to go back home and go to the barn and get the horse. Bring the horse into the house and come back." And she protested more loudly, and he said, "Please do as I say." And so she goes back and she gets the horse and brings the horse into the house. She comes back the next week and she was apoplectic. Life was so awful and she was so miserable and she was so stressed with, and she went through her list again, and now that old horse also in there in the house messing up. And he said, "Now here's what I want you to do. I want you to go home and I want you to take the cow and the horse and put them back in the barn and come see me next week." Well, she came back next week and she was all smiles, and she said, "Rabbi, life is so wonderful without the cow and the horse." So as we're learning to bear our loads and move through life, a little playfulness is so helpful, isn't it? A few stories that we can tell over and over and over again. Stories are the stuff out of which life is made. And a good story can get you through anything, and if a story won't do it, a song will. Stories and songs, that's the way we face life, and that's the way we sort of move through. But we examine our list, and there are some things that we need to sort out, and sometimes that takes a little courage. There are some things sometimes we need to stop because we may be carrying too much, and we have to ask now, what's at stake with all my busyness? What's at stake with the burdens that I carry and the way I carry? What's getting left out? It's like one of the best 30 seconds that any of us can ever spend is after we've been out all day at job, at career, whatever it is, however we've filled our day, and we drive back up to the house and we get ready to get out of the car. We ought to sit for about 30 seconds and realize that some of the most important work that we will ever do is going to happen in the next little bit. Something that helps us to stay focused on what will matter on the last day. Just takes a little time, but it can transform our lives. It can transform the workplace, transform the home. It can transform our organizations if we just take a little reflective time. And then secondly, we need to ask how we're dealing with our burdens, because every burden has 2 handles. One of them cuts your hand and the other fits. There's one way to carry our responsibilities that literally lessens our life, diminishes our life, reduces our life, minimizes our own existence. It cuts us down. One of the questions we have to think about and think seriously about is, how can I keep my life from getting smaller as my losses become greater? How can, as life tears away, how can I stay strong? How can I approach whatever it is that I have to live, whatever the burdens are that I have to bear? How can I find them with a handle that fits so that I don't wind up like the person on a fast-moving train standing there holding a heavy suitcase, not knowing that if they would just set the suitcase down, they'd get there just as quickly. There are some things that we probably do need just to put down that are just not so critical for us to carry anymore. How I find those things that fit. Now, the burden that fits is always deeply tied to your humanity. It's always tied to your humanity. The philosopher from Harvard, Nozick, has assigned points to a well-lived life. And the professor says that if you were assigning 100 points to a total life, that it would break down this way. That first of all, you would get 50 points just for being alive. I found that somehow encouraging myself. Then the philosopher says you get another 30 points for being human. Human. As glorious as all creation is, there's not anything that's quite as fascinating as a human being. 30 points for being human. Now, if I were teaching children, I would ask them how many points that is. And especially if I were teaching children who had been beaten up on a lot and who were used to failure. I asked a group, I said, how many points is that? And they said, well, that's 80. 80 points. I said, well, now, in school, what letter grade is assigned to 80 points? They said, well, in our school, it's a B. And I said, well, then every single kid in the group today has a B in the most important course of all, which is life. Well, that took a little doing to get them to believe that, because their lives didn't feel like a B life just then. Then the philosopher says you get another 10 points for having a skill to be able to do something. Now, how many points is that? 90. 90. That's the one up in the A bracket. Now, none of us has had to mess up with any of this yet to get 90. The last 10 points are assigned to the problems and the difficulties. And do you know what most of us do? We spend 90% of our time dealing with that last 10%. Life has a way of focusing, and whatever a little difficulty or problem is, has a way of just sort of moving all the way to the edges of our life, and it becomes the whole life. Now, to face life and to get to that last day in the way that all of us dream of getting there is going to require, for some of us, a little different approach. Most human lives oscillate between these polarities. Is a little self-centeredness okay? Of course it is. Are you ever going to get rid of all of it? I doubt it. It's part of what it means to be a person. Insignificance. Is that also a little part of our lives? Almost nobody doesn't deal with a little bit of that. But we tend to swing between those polarities. We either feel like we can do everything or we feel like we can do nothing. Life moves between those two great heresies. Now, if I spend my life sort of oscillating between these two things, and on the one hand, if you ask me now, if self-centeredness, is that really, should you just put all your weight down there? We all would probably say, no, that's not the best. But somehow, in getting away from a self-centered life, I wind up feeling like a zero. And is that the way that a life is to be lived? And I think it's not that. How do I keep from just swinging back and forth between these things? In other words, how do I get out of myself the treasures that are really there? It's like the little boy who stands before the vending machine and he sees through the glass all those goodies and candies and gum and mints. But he can't figure out how to get it out until someone came along and handed him a coin and said, the way you do that is to put the coin in, and then these good things drop out. Sometimes you see little kids looking at their parents, and they can see all those good things in there, but they can't figure out how to get them out. They can't figure out how to get the best, the most delicious, the most powerful, the most encouraging, the most loving, the most uplifting. They can't quite figure out because everybody is always so busy. And the answer isn't somehow to stop being busy and just spend all of our time doing that. That's not an option. We can't do that. And so what we're trying to find is that path between being impaled on the horns of self-centeredness or insignificance over to where we have a sense of soul. Now, not have a soul in sort of the religious sense. We've all got souls. But have a sense of soul in the sense that you're a good person, you know, and you've got excitement in your life, and you're good company, and you know the things to laugh at and the things to cry about. And there's a growing sense of human being as we struggle between these two things. In the school that I mentioned a moment ago, and I do this oftentimes, especially in dealing with children who just haven't had a chance yet in the world. I try to give them all an A in life to get their spirits up. And then I'll have them say something like, I'm a good person. And just have them just repeat that. Or no matter what you do or say, I'm still a worthwhile person. And sometimes to take them and have them imagine a parent that hasn't known how to love them and that just beats them up day after day, and to help them learn to say to them, even silently, no matter what you do or say, I'm still a worthwhile person. And I move among the children, and I assume the role sometimes of a person who's beaten them down. And I say, now look at me and say it. And sometimes through their tears, they will say, no matter what you do or say, I'm still a worthwhile person. There's a little bit of the lion spirit that's got to come up just there. I want to leave you with my own hopes and dreams that I'm mentioning because I think they're your hopes and dreams as well. We have a lot of problems in this society. And we hear it, we read it in the newspapers, we hear it on the radio, we hear it on television. Our problems are so massive that I promise you there's only one thing strong enough to solve them. And that's one single human being at a time, beginning with us. To be the happy, hopeful, courageous, loving kind of person that we're meant to be. If that doesn't solve our problems, nothing ever will. And I try to ask people to do 3 things on the way to being human. First of all, spend a little time each day, just a little time, reflecting on your life and whether or not you're emphasizing the things that you most want to be there on the last day. It just takes a few seconds a day to do that. It will absolutely be the most important. And listen during that time. Sometimes we have a period of time like that and we are always reading something or we're always saying something, and that's important. But it's also important just to be still for a few moments and reach and touch the depths of life and get into those areas of our consciousness that we don't usually get into, places from which we can be strong. The second thing that people need to do, we all need to do, is hang out with a few other people for 30, 40 minutes or an hour a week. It may be your own family, it may be friends and neighbors or a neighborhood group in which you talk about these kinds of things. Take a sheet like this and talk about this and tell stories. Tell stories of both success and stories of failure, and encourage one another. There's not anything that could add more luster to our lives than just being a part of a little group that's designed to think about what it means to be a human being. And the last thing is to engage in daily, secret acts of kindness. You do something each day and you don't tell. Nothing, I promise you, nothing has greater power for transformation than that simple little thing. Do it because it's right to do it if nobody knows. You will mine depths of your life that will come out that nothing else will ever bring. In being this kind of person, instead of being a cistern that constantly gathers everybody into ourselves and we try to make a life that way, we'll become quickly an overflowing fountain. And that's what your community needs. That's what our society needs. It's what our homes need. It's what our churches need all across this land.
We hope that today's episode has delivered some practical ideas on how to deal with what life may throw at you today, and in the process, find a little peace along the way. If the answer is yes, then we invite you to subscribe or follow wherever you get your content. And if you're inclined, when you rate and review the podcast, it helps us expand the reach of Landon's material. This podcast is made possible by friends of Heartbeat who invite you to explore more of Landon's content by visiting the website at thisisheartbeat.com. That's thisisheartbeat.com. And until next time, this is Heartbeat, the podcast.